Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Welcome to Our Town, the show about Rochester. I'm Nicole Nfonoyim-Hara, and today I'm joined by co-host Danielle Teal. Coming up next, we'll be kicking off the Rochester City Council candidate discussions with the Ward 3 seat candidates. So stick around, you won't want to miss it.
Ward 3 spans the northwestern area of Rochester, and with Nick Campion not running for re-election, there's an open seat. We're joined today by Ward 3 City Council candidates Vangie Castro and Norman Wahl. Welcome to Our Town. So let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, Norman, and what are the top issues that are your priority?
Thank you, and thank you for hosting us on this forum. I am a lifelong Minnesotan, but for 6 years that I spent in some neighboring states, almost all of that in southeastern Minnesota. The last 26 years of those right here in Rochester. I have a 41-year career as a pastor, married to my wife Kathy, who is 38 years, retired as a public school teacher. 3 kids, 7 grandkids. Pleased that 3 of those grandkids are right here in Rochester, and they are able to take part in all of the activities Rochester offers, including the public school system, for which we are very grateful. You asked about some of the major issues I hear on the trail. Primarily, I think they are financial. I think people are concerned about livability, housing costs, taxes. There are some things we can't do anything about, like inflation, but we do have control over some things. And so the high cost of taxes, both property and business taxes, I think are high on people's minds. Another is public safety. We have a great city in which to live, and very safe for the most part. We have a great police chief, fire chief, EMT. They are keeping this city very livable in the way of safety, but we need to continue to promote that so that we can have neighborhoods that will allow us to thrive for decades to come.
Thank you so much, Norman. And Vangie, thank you so much for being here. Please share a little bit more about yourself and what are the top issues on the mind of your ward's residents?
Oh, thanks for having me, Danielle and Nicole here. So I've been working in nonprofits here at Rochester for over 12 years. Originally from California, grew up there. My family immigrated to the United States when I was really young, and I have always been passionate about public service. It's kind of a legacy in our family. I'm a community organizer. I am also the board chair for the Olmsted County Human Rights Commission. And as a community organizer and a human rights advocate and a local leader, I'm really well equipped to bring some of the local issues, and especially also working in nonprofits, to the City Council to discuss things like good governance, affordable housing, concerns around taxes, what is happening with the DMC, which a lot of people are kind of misunderstand about, and also what it looks like for what Rochester will look like as a vibrant city for the future and sustainability.
Thank you, Vangie.
Thanks.
So you mentioned DMC, and we'll start with you this time. Recently, DMC came out with their 2023 work plan and budget, which was approved, and it'll be coming forward to the City Council shortly. Can you share what your thoughts are around the plan, the work plan, and the budget?
I think a lot of people have to understand exactly what the DMC is first before we really kind of discuss where the City Council in the decision-making process about the budget. So the DMC was a state legislated initiative brought forth by Mayo Clinic and the city and the county, and also the idea of public and private funding coming together to build this welcoming, inclusive city that is focused on wellness and being the center of like national health, right? Global health. So the DMC gets to work on bringing private funding to the city of Rochester to ensure that public funds will be spent fiscally responsibly. So when the city council decides what the DMC proposes, like Discovery Walk or some of the other buildings for, let's talk about sewers and sidewalks and all the infrastructure that needs to happen to build up downtown Rochester. So what happens is a lot of the private funds that come into the city of Rochester, that means that a lot of the public funds that the city has can also go to other parts of the city. So with private investing and public funds matching, it alleviates some of our budget, the city budget, to be able to be spent on Northwest Rochester. And so I think the progress of DMC building the city from 120,000 to 140,000, I think will be helpful for us as a growing city.
Thank you, Vangie. And Norman, what are your thoughts around the DMC work plan or budget, or you can also just talk about it generally as Vangie did?
Sure, and I think Vangie did a really nice encapsulation of what DMC is. What I hear on the trail in Ward 3 is a lot of confusion about DMC and the money that's being spent, and is there any return? I'd give you one example that DMC has taken 14 surface parking lots in downtown Rochester, which previous to their redevelopment returned about $685,000 in property taxes to the city. Because those properties have been redeveloped, they are now returning annually $7 million to the city. So as Vangie has suggested, that some of the things that DMC is doing benefits the whole of Rochester. Ward 3, all 6 wards, is very accurate. And I think that DMC needs to be able to tell that story a little bit more clearly to all of Rochester, so that we don't have this perception that everything is for downtown, everything is for Mayo. Actually, Mayo is putting in all of their own money, as they already were going to, that the state and the city are doing infrastructure that allows infrastructure from the 1950s to grow into the 21st century.
Thank you, Norman. Okay, so we talked about DMC. Let's talk about the transportation. What is your specific vision for transportation improvements and accessibility?
Well, the rapid transit that is already in the books, that is planned, certainly is going to happen with the help of federal funding, although it will need to have our local oversight and costs for running that system for years to come. That is a thorny issue in virtually every city of size, to be able to move people to the places where they need to be. Whether we can use those circulators or have those remote lots, have parking ramps, and get people downtown to where they need to be. Both workers and visitors will be critical to the success of downtown. Clearly, people are always going to be the issue. Whether that's Mayo employees returning to the downtown core, or whether that's support personnel and our guests, our people who need health care. This is a story that has been worked on for decades. It's a story that is going to continue to be talked about 25 years from today, as we try to move people efficiently. So the City Council needs to support that efficient movement of people for our downtown, and really the whole city as it continues to grow.
Thank you, Norman. How about you, Vangie? What are your thoughts around the transportation vision and accessibility?
So Norman mentioned the circulator, which is a DMC initiative to be able to have bring people downtown and also all the way down to Cascade Lakes. Hopefully, it will eventually grow and will reach out to other parts, other quadrants in the city. If it becomes popular, it's also free, not necessarily free. It's feeless, I guess, because somebody is paying for it, Mayo is investing in it. And to create the city to be more livable, to be more inviting for a larger workforce that we are expecting in 2040 if we do not attract the skilled labor that we're looking for. We'll have about a 17,000 worker shortage. And so if we don't create a livable and walkable and accessible and affordable city, then it's going to be, it doesn't really matter what transportation looks like for us, right? But what a lot of people in Ward 3 have talked about is how to get downtown easier, and that transportation, like public buses, is more affordable or fee-free. So I think it's something that we need to invest in and look into, and that we are working on currently.
Thank you so much, both of you. Vangie, could you talk a little specifically about how you define the housing needs in the city currently, and if elected, how would you work on addressing some of the housing issues?
We have a very low inventory stock of single-family homes, so I think it's really important to look at diversifying what housing looks like and the idea of affordable housing. Some people do not think affordable housing is a real thing. So I always like to discuss like what mixed income housing looks like, because affordable housing is based on AMI, which for some people who live like 100% or 80% below the poverty line, I think $900 for rent is actually not affordable. So if we create more stock, housing stock, like mixed-use housing, mixed income housing, we create more of an inventory which actually lowers rent or mortgage, and that may help make our city more affordable for folks, especially young people, young professionals that we're trying to retain and attract to the city. But we do have a bit of a housing crisis. I mean, not just in Rochester, but all over the nation. And if it comes down to like people being able to find clean, safe housing or affordable housing, that's something that the city and the county need to work together on to make sure that we are providing the housing stock that we need.
Thank you, Vangie. And Norman, how do you specifically define some of the needs, the housing needs in the city, and if elected, what would you do to address them?
A study a couple of years ago indicated that we would need about 18,000 new units of housing by the year 2030. It was pretty evenly split between the needs for senior housing, the needs for multi-family housing, and the needs for, and what was the third one? I can't remember it right now. But we need to have thousands and thousands more units. One thing that I think that we need to always be reminded of is that this is not just the city's problem. The county, the state, even the federal government have a great stake in ensuring that people are housed adequately, safely. And so we in Rochester have done a pretty good job, I think, of writing grants, of trying to secure that kind of out-of-the-city funding that will assist us. Rochester sends away more money than we get back in grants, so we need to participate fully in ensuring that we can use some of that money for the needs of a growing city. So we need to work one project at a time with developers, with neighborhoods, so that we have the appropriate kinds of housing in the appropriate places, so that people have adequate resources for retail, for transportation. And again, this is something that is rife in every city. If we get the answer right for Rochester for the next couple of decades, it doesn't mean that we will have solved the problem forever. We will need to continue to work on housing as our city grows and evolves.
Thank you, Norman. And speaking of housing, Rochester residents are already feeling the pinch of property taxes increasing, and we're looking towards another possible significant tax levy with inflation, everything going on. What are your thoughts around that, and how would you approach this issue?
Yes. The city is only one part of property taxes. But the city is one part of the property taxes, and so we need to be responsible with that. I would be, if elected to the council, in favor of the city growing to the percentage that the city of Rochester is growing. So that if we could point to a 3% growth in a year, I would say that a 3% growth in the city levy would be acceptable. But for us to continue to levy beyond what natural growth would provide actually provides a great deal of pinch. Recently talked with a fellow in his garage, is retired, lives on a limited income. He's concerned about inflation and taxes, just as you say. And he looked at me with, I think, fear in his eyes, saying, I don't know how long I can stick this out and stay in Rochester with the costs. So I think the Rochester City Council needs to really be clear about why we are spending, that we take a sharpened pencil, even an eraser, and try to figure out how we can be better managers, stewards of the money that we already have.
Thank you, Norman. And Vangie, I know you mentioned concerns about affordable housing. This certainly, residents are feeling that pinch with property taxes, possible more taxes levied. What are your thoughts around this?
I think it's unfortunate that we do have to raise property taxes. It is our way of investing in the growth of the city. I wish I could say that, yeah, we shouldn't raise taxes or cut taxes, because that would really help alleviate a lot of folks who may be hurting because of inflation or job loss or limited income. But because Rochester is planning on growing because of the DMC, and it is just more of a destination city nowadays, that even though it hurts to pay a little bit more, and it may be difficult for a lot of folks, like Norman had mentioned, to be able to pay, even if it's just $400 more a year in property taxes, it is something that we have to do if we believe in our city and investing in the growth of it and what it's going to look like for the future and future generations. Like Norman had mentioned earlier, that I think it is important for us to be good stewards of the money that we do receive from property taxes, but also working with the county to decide, like, if it is a 5.4% jump, or if we, and that's just like the high, because it could be less than that. So we have to kind of have more discussions about what's reasonable for residents of Rochester and Olmsted County.
Thank you, Vangie. Norman mentioned this in his introduction, but we're going to switch a little bit talking about public safety.
Sure.
So, it's a growing city, and a big part of that is thinking about improving public safety. What are your thoughts around continuing to improve our public safety while also promoting stronger ties between members of the community and law enforcement?
I think for public safety, a lot of people think that public safety is just the police. It's also the fire department, it's public works, it's making sure that we have good lighting in places like parks, and community engagement, making sure that folks in communities that may have higher crime rates, but nationally, if you actually look at the numbers, Rochester is a relatively safe city. And that's because I believe that the city, public works, the police department, fire department, all the folks that help keep our city safe work together with the community to ensure that we know what is needed, and not just telling people this is what we're going to do to ensure your safety, but working with the community itself. If it is the Black, Indigenous, people of color community, folks who are experiencing homelessness, people experiencing mental health crises, I think us as a city investing and making sure that we are addressing the systemic issues that may create public safety issues will really help to ensure Rochester continues to be a safe and welcoming city.
Thank you, Vangie. And Norman, how would you work to improve public safety while also promoting stronger ties between public safety and our community?
I think in visiting with the people of the ward, it generally feels like a safe city for the people of the ward. We're quite a ways from downtown. There's a perception that somehow Rochester has followed some of the larger cities in America, even Minnesota, where the crime rate is increasing exponentially. Instead, a report that came out last week about Rochester said that our crime rate, major crime rate, is decreasing a little bit. I think that we have a great police chief who has put together a good force. I think that they are making changes, including embedding people who can respond to non-emergency calls in an appropriate way. I think that we need to support the public safety. I had a chance to be on a golf course with the fire chief for about 4.5 hours this past summer at a charity event. And we had a chance to talk about all kinds of things in terms of public safety, and we have a great rating in Rochester. But he is concerned that as Rochester grows out rather than maybe more dense or up, it's going to be harder to cover the city of Rochester in terms of the miles to a fire station, which will then increase insurance rates for the people of Rochester. So I think there's a lot of things that intersect in order to provide that public safety. I think that this is a good city, relatively safe, especially among cities. But we need to continue to invest in those things, like lighting that Vangie suggests, so that we can continue to lift this up as a place where we want people to visit, to live, to work.
Thank you, Norman. And Vangie, since you went last when we introduced the closing question, finally, what makes you best suited for the position on City Council, Ward 3?
So I'm kind of like the American story. Pulled myself up by my bootstraps kind of thing. Worked full time going through junior college and graduated from a 4-year university with a political science public administration degree. So I've always really been passionate about addressing policy issues that can help create social change in a positive way. And right now, currently, I work in a nonprofit that works at addressing some of the most pressing issues here in Rochester. So I know what are a lot of the needs for folks who are very marginalized and whose voices aren't being heard. And so I think it's important for people like me to be able to be part of the political process, to be able to be part of policy decision making, to be able to represent and be the voice of folks who always feel a little put aside and disconnected from the decisions that folks are making for their everyday lives. And so what makes me the best candidate for Ward 3 City Council? Because I care and I love the city that I work and live in, and where I have been a golfer, a community member, a board member, and all the different things to feel connected in this community.
Thank you, Vangie. And Norman, what makes you best suited for City Council?
Well, my career has honed skills for both leadership and collaboration. I've needed to listen to the positions of perhaps dozens of positions on any one issue and help forge goals that we can work on together as large organizations. I've led things locally, statewide and nationally, served on boards locally and nationally, boards of regions and school boards. My greatest joy is in helping people. I really enjoy helping people overcome their obstacles and then finding a way to get to a point where even if we might be of different opinions on sides of the table, that we can forge that path together. Again, I think that Rochester is a great place to be. I am very unhappy with the state of politics in our nation these days. It's a politics of divisiveness. Instead, I think that we need to work together to make Rochester the very best place it can be.
Thank you so much for joining us, Norman and Vangie. And thank you for joining us as we heard from the Ward 3 candidates for City Council. Next week, we'll be joined by the Ward 5 candidates, which include incumbent Patrick Keene and challenger Saida Omar. From 125 Live, we will see you next week on Our Town, the show about Rochester.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.